Hi everyone, I apologise for this being a talking head video, but I would really like to get at least a little bit of technology in here with my connectivity issues. For those who don't know, I live in Roma, I live out of town, therefore I have to have satellite internet. Probably not something that I will come across in town, but it is definitely something that more remote schools may actually have to contend with. I wanted to talk to the key points to barriers in using ICT, and the main point I came across when I was reading was that the fundamental barriers other than connectivity, were not that different in rural areas to urban ones. One that came up all the time was professional development and teacher workload. So having the time to go and participate in the professional development, obviously being further out, being more rural, the actual time spent to go to that professional development, say if it's held in Brisbane, for example, we're 6.5 hours from Brisbane, therefore we would have to leave the day before to get to the professional development, even if it's only an afternoon. And then of course we'd have to have the time taken to go home. So say if it wasn't done during the holidays or during a weekend, if it was done during teaching time, that's 3 days out of teaching as opposed to maybe an afternoon. The other points that I wanted to talk to was technical support. So often, and this probably, I'm going to say, ties in with having qualified teachers. So another thing that came up was actually having the qualified teachers teaching their subject, their specialty subject. And I have already been told by people who are in the school in which I may be teaching in, that their expectation is that they will basically throw any subject at me as a pre-service teacher, and if they don't have a teacher to teach it, you simply have to do a lot of research before you deliver the subject. So you're not always getting teachers in these roles who necessarily know much more than the students do, and when it comes to technical support, I think that's going to be a really big problem. So the first year you deliver a new software, for example, you are, as a teacher, are going to have to learn how to troubleshoot all of those, that program and all the things that may go wrong. And possibly if you're delivering an assessment for the first time and it has a large ICT component, you are then going to have to learn to troubleshoot those yourselves, because you may not necessarily have the technical support. In the readings, it came up with things like computers, so hardware that actually needed reformatting, and the person had to, say, come from Toowoomba or Brisbane, and they couldn't come for, say, a month at a time. It's a huge chunk out of a 10-week term if you take 4 weeks out. So definitely that goes into your rural and remote classrooms. The other thing I wanted to look at was changing of hardware and software. So computers are changing so incredibly quickly, and if you were going to buy a suite of iPads, so for example, when iPads first came out, and I think it's around 2008-ish, I have one of the original iPads which can no longer be updated with software, so it's not actually possible to use it with any of the programs anymore. It's basically a glorified paperweight, and I need to get rid of it. So if I was actually a school and I had 100 of these things, I then have to somehow trade these in with a company or recycle them and get new ones, which is really, really expensive. The other issue that I spoke about at the beginning is connectivity. My connectivity here with satellite internet is not great, so I've found that a lot of the really, really great resources I've been given during this course, I just can't get to work because I cannot get the upload speed. And that may well be the case in the classrooms. And it's sort of looking at the ICT activities and going, okay, well, how can I make this a group activity so we can have more students participating, but less that needs to be uploaded, if that makes sense. So you're not, instead of having 25 files, you might have 5 files to upload, and that might be more possible. The time spent on high stakes testing did sort of creep in there. I think it was out of one of the course readings. I haven't taught in a lot of schools where this has actually been the case yet, but I have taught in rural and remote schools, and there really wasn't a lot of time spent. I was in term 3 and term 4 in both of those schools, so a lot of that high stakes testing happens further towards the beginning of the year, so possibly I just haven't been in the teaching cycle where I've seen it, so it definitely could be an issue. I didn't see anything directly related in the literature to rural and remote schools and high stake testing. That is basically everything I wanted to cover if we're going to give a broad overview of what I've read and what I've learned, and hopefully that just gives a little bit of a break to all the reading and you enjoy the rest of the page.